Okay, welcome everybody to another edition of the mind-boggling concepts in the Torah. As per usual, please put down any sharp objects and don't get too close to the camera. We don't want to spread any of those diseases. So this week's parsha is a mind-boggler extraordinaire. Parsha's Kitisa. You might have heard of it, the famous golden calf. Right? Probably, I would say, other than most other concepts of the Torah, this is about the most misunderstood concept you're going to find. I'm not going to say everybody gets it wrong, but it's close to everybody. It's mind-boggling how this whole story is misunderstood. But let's start with something a little different. Now for something complete. Go back to my Monty Python days. Now for something completely different. We'll start with a great couple of thoughts. Both from Rav Noach. Absolutely, also mind-boggling. The parsha starts out with the famous counting of the Jews, the census, and the Torah points out that you count people from 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might have heard, I don't know where you've heard it, that we become a person when you're 12 years old as a girl and 13 years old for a boy. Right?
A person or just obligated.
You're obligated, right? When you reach those ages, you become responsible. You become responsible for other Jews. You become responsible for yourself. In other words, if you're 8 years old and God forbid you eat treif, right? There's not a problem. I mean, there's a problem for a different reason, but you're not going to excuse the expression, have to pay for that in the next world. It's not something you should do, but nevertheless, right? You're not commanded 8 years old to not eat treif, to not break Shabbos, to not steal, to all kinds of different things, right? 12 years old for a girl, 13 years old for a boy, bingo. Now you're in the frying pan, right? You don't
Not 100%, because you're still considered, you're obligated, but your obligations can only go so far because you haven't really matured as a human being.
That's true, right? You have a certain level of responsibility based on your background. In other words, you're raised by cannibals in Ecuador, right? Your plane crashed in the Andes, and you're raised by barbarians in the jungle, and you don't speak English or Hebrew or anything. You don't know you're Jewish or nothing, right? And you're not going to be held responsible. There's nothing you could do. It was called in Hebrew tinuk shenishba, a child that was stolen as a baby. Right? They're not responsible. Right? So that's true, right? But nevertheless, at 12 and 13, that's when it kicks in. Right? What's this 20?
20 is when you're mature enough to go to war. And if you're
Right.
mature enough to go to war, you're mature enough to have kids, and etc., etc., etc.
Right, you can drink in a bar, right?
Vote.
You can vote, right? You can vote, right? So at 20, you become responsible for other people. In other words, at 13 years old, for a boy, you become responsible for your mitzvahs. The guy next door eats treif. The guy next door doesn't keep Shabbos. The guy next door becomes a mafioso kingpin. That's not on your account. You might go, okay, he's in trouble. You're fine. At 20 years old, now you become responsible for other people.
It's interesting, that example that you're giving. How can you be responsible for another person when people don't listen to other people? Like, they don't, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you'd have to like develop a very deep relationship to get to across to someone.
That's true. Well, you got to keep going. The Talmud says, how far do you have to keep going to correct somebody? Right? There's an argument in the Gemara whether you need to go as far as whether they're going to hit you or whether they're going to scream. I believe it's either hit you or scream at you.
Yeah, be careful with that mafioso kingpin. You don't want to be in his crosshairs.
Right. Oops, we lost you there. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Is it our side or your side?
I think it's your. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Oh, here we go. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So where do we go?
We said that you don't want to be in the crosshairs of your neighborly mafioso king.
Right. You got to be careful, right? But nevertheless, you have a mitzvah to rebuke people. But we don't have this idea that I'm okay. You have a responsibility to your next door neighbor, right? Up until the point it's going to hit you. Right? You got to keep going.
So when you say hit, it's not just the physical hit.
Right. Okay. Well, that's the argument. That's the argument in the Talmud, right? If he shouts at you, is that I've done as much as I can.
Right.
Right. No, it should be noted that I think I can speak for myself here, that there are many things that people say to you that do not resonate at the time they say it, but later on they go, that sort of plays on you, and so you might not be effective right now. There's the famous story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Dudaya. Right? It's a famous story that he frequented every prostitute there was in the world, right? Everyone's got to have a hobby, I guess. So that was his hobby, right? So one time he heard of a prostitute lived far away and charged an exorbitant amount of money. But, a hobby is a hobby, a commitment's a commitment. So off he goes, right? And he meets her and they negotiate a price. And she's so disgusted by his attitude that she insults him. And that gets through. I often talk about the story of my father-in-law, may rest in peace. So he was a lifelong smoker. Not to compare those two things. It's not the same thing, but nevertheless, right? We all got things that we shouldn't do. I shouldn't say we all, although probably we all got things we shouldn't do, right? So he and no one else in the family smoked, so he used to get grief from everybody, right? Who got through? His grandson, my son David, right? When he was 3 years old, Grandpa wanted to pick him up, and he said, "Grandpa, you smell," right? And that got through. Now,
yeah, but that's because he wanted your father-in-law wanted that close relationship with your son, and that rejection woke him up because it was an honest rejection, right? But if the relationship didn't matter to him, he couldn't have cared less.
That's true, right? There's all kinds of factors that went into why that worked. But I believe it's Rabbi Dessler who points this out about Rabbi Eliezer ben Dodaya, that she did not say this in a vacuum. This guy, Eliezer ben Dodaya, he had a brother, he had a sister, he had a mother, he had a father, he had neighbors, right? When people do something, when you live in a community and everyone's doing the same thing they shouldn't be doing, whatever that happens to be, right? But whatever level you're in community is, that's one thing. But if you have somebody in your community who's going out of the norm, right? He's getting grief or she's getting grief from everybody.
Right? I don't know, Rabbi. A lot of people hide their stuff.
Right, I'm not saying that, but if you've got somebody who's like, everybody knows what this person's doing, right? Like you go to shul, there's different standards, different shows, different. I was just in Miami, they do different things there. Everyone's got a show. You go to a show, right? And the guy comes in with flip flops and shorts, and this is in Netanya, right? And there are places in the world where people do go to shul like that. I've seen it, but there are places where you don't do that, right? And this guy, he's a member of the community, and he goes to shul in flip flops and shorts, right, and a t-shirt, right? You follow? And it's a bit of an eyesore. People speak to him. They're not going to tell him he can't come to shul. But they speak to, I'm not talking about just on regular week, right? On Shabbos, on Yom Tov, on Yom Kippur. There's like, oh my goodness, right? So, it's like, it's when I started this whole career in Eish Torah, guys did not know what to wear when they went to shul. They just there were many instances where people were wearing things, it was a little bit out of place. But nevertheless, right, they weren't stupid people, and they figured out, how to dress and stuff like that. Someone didn't have clothes like that. So anyway, if you got somebody like that, right? He's not listening. He keeps doing it, and it's just like, he's not listening. Right, so Eliezer ben Dodaya, as Rabbi Dessler points out, he must have had people. He was extreme. He was extreme. He must have had people that were telling him, like, this is not appropriate. Come on, get your act together. Right? You understand? So what she said was not in a vacuum. In the same way that when my son said that to my father-in-law, it wasn't in a vacuum. He was the straw that broke the camel's back. But you had to have all those people previous that were on his case, and that this got through. It wouldn't have happened if he was the only one. My son was the only one who said it. It wouldn't have meant anything.
That may be true, but again, if your son had not been someone that your father-in-law felt strongly about, then it wouldn't have gone through. Like, the lady who spoke to Ben Dodaya, like, the only reason he probably even heard her is because, she was up here in his eyes, and he was like, oh, this is the person I need to see. And so to hear something so insulting from someone that gets paid to be ingratiating and very complimentary is going to hit hard, because you're not expecting it, number one, and number two, you're looking for a certain positive response, and it's a bit of a shock when you don't get it.
That's 100% right. I would just tweak what you just said a little bit. It wasn't because she was somebody who had esteem in his eyes.
Not esteem, but he wanted something from her.
Right, but she was somebody who was low in his eyes. And and she's giving me criticism. Like, there's a shul here, very popular shul, very from shul as opposed to not from shul, but like, real shul, right? Serious shul, right? I have a big thing that clocks do not belong in a shul, right? In a base Knesset, in a place that you daven.
Oh. It could be
right?
outside the room, but not
Yeah,
inside the room. I
yeah,
got it.
right. And I've talked to a few rabbis who have clocks. I tell them, you shouldn't have the clocks, right? It's a big distraction. Time. This is an interesting question for you. Is time gashmi? Is time physical, or is time spiritual?
Depends how you treat it.
Well, you can use anything physical for spiritual purpose, and you can demean anything spiritual too. But nevertheless, in its essence, is time a physical thing or a spiritual thing?
In its essence, it's physical.
Oh, very good. How do you say that? I
Because
totally agree. Yeah.
because like, I mean, we now do it in terms of seconds, minutes, and hours, but people would look at it from the perspective of where's the sun in the sky to know how much of the day has actually passed.
Right.
And so to you, it's like a commodity, just like gold is a commodity. Okay, I only have this amount of time. There's a physical aspect to it. It's constrained.
Right.
So that's why it's gashmi.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Right. Now, so when you put a clock in a shawl, you're bringing, baseball, a television.
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing a physical thing. Right now, we see this. There's a pasuk in the Torah that supports this idea. It says that Yaakov's love for Rachel was so great. So for Rivka, if I can say it right the first time, Yaakov's love for Rachel was so great, the time diminished. In other words, this physical, his Ruchnius experience was so overwhelming that it minimized the Gashmius. It minimized the physical. Meaning, if you're focused on the time, you're not going to have a Ruchnius experience.
Right. It's like you're thinking, okay, I need to leave in 3 minutes. You don't even pay attention to your kid as they're talking to them.
That's right. Exactly. Right. So that's why you shouldn't have clocks. And so this Rabbi Berger in the Baltimore, so he built a very big show. It's a beautiful show, and he was going to put a clock in it. And his contractor, who wasn't Jewish, said to him, "Why are you putting a clock in a place of worship? Our church, exactly. Our church, we don't have a clock in it. We don't have a clock in the church, right? So our Berger says, if the non-Jew doesn't have a clock in his, how can I have a clock in mine?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? Powerful idea. You shouldn't have a clock. It takes away from the experience. You can't. It's very hard to connect when you're looking at the time. Very hard to have a meaningful experience. But anyway, I digress.
We digress because I was arguing with you because I enjoy arguing. It's a Jewish trait.
But how do we bring up time? How did that come about?
Maybe census?
No, because you were saying that the reason why Ben Dadaya was able to hear the lady in question was because in his eyes she was low, and so it went through. It's a very strange concept.
Why is it a very strange concept?
Because you would think that one would not hear a person that one had low esteem for.
That's true. 100% right. That but that's how she was so impactful. Because he wasn't expecting anything from her. That's what they bring around Rabbi Berger. Right? The non-Jew doesn't have a clock in his church. You understand? That's where he got them. That's what hit him. If a non-Jew doesn't have a Christian doesn't have a clock. How can I have a clock? Right? And he doesn't have a clock.
So if a lady engaged in sin is telling me that I have no, what did she say to her? I forget exactly, that there was no hope for him or something like that.
Yeah, there's no hope for him. Right.
Right. So if a lady who's engaged in sin on a daily basis is telling him that he has no hope, then it finally gets through. She's basically saying you're pathetic.
Right. Exactly.
You're more pathetic than I am. That's what she's saying.
That's right. So now, But she only got through because all the previous people had been on his case. If they hadn't have said what they said, so when we give tahacha, when we give rebuke, it could very well be that you're not going to get through. But that's okay, because you're the necessary ingredient for the next person to get through.
So are you saying that once you give the tachacha, that you're no longer obligated?
Once you go into as pushed it as far as you possibly can push it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I've read, and I think we've also discussed that these days people don't know how to give tachacha.
Right, the Gemara also says that. We don't know how to
So
give
do we even have an obligation, considering that we don't know how to do it?
Okay, now you're getting into above my pay grade. I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a posek by any stretch of the imagination, but you can't, if you have no right to tell your spouse what they're doing wrong, except for the fact that there's a mitzvah tahacha. So if you hold that it's okay what my spouse does and I'm not saying anything, then you're right. Don't tell anyone to the neighbor. But if you feel like you have a right, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah to give tahacha, and that includes your spouse, then you gotta use that also for the next door neighbor too.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying whatever you hold by, then you have to use it with everybody.
Right, including your spouse. I'm the only one who lives like that.
Yeah, it's painful giving people tachacha.
Yeah, it's not comfortable, but we don't like to do
No,
it.
it has to do with comfort. They punish you. They strike at you.
Yeah.
Strike and strike. Like you just, and it could come from a place of caring, but they'll strike at you. I've done this with people, and oh my gosh, how they strike is astounding, to the point where like they have no issues with saying lashon hara, but it's not even lashon hara because it's not true what they say. So it's more like Motzi Shemra, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So they'll stoop that low. They'll say Motzi Shemra just because they're so upset at you.
Right.
And you're coming from a place of like, look, I see that you're struggling here. I don't think you're going to get married because of this issue that you've got going here. Like, you really need to take this seriously. What I'm saying to you, I couldn't care less. Like, I'm noticing something that you hide from others, and this is the reason why you're having troubles. Nope.
Right. That's true. Right. That's true. But you see, right, that a parent is not somebody who simply has a baby. A parent is somebody who takes responsibility for molding that child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, please God, one day you're going to walk your son or your daughter down the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Amen.
Right? Please God, right? And you're going to say to your spouse something along the lines, well, we tried. We did. We gave it our best. Good luck to their spouse. Right? Because nobody gets married perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We are half-baked. And therefore our spouses, your son-in-law, your daughter-in-law, is going to have a job. Right? Sometimes it's a big job. Sometimes it's a little job. But it's a job. Right?
Yeah, but if it becomes obvious in the dating scene, right, that because this person can't see their own flaw, but it comes through, like, because women are very intuitive, they pick up that something is like massively wrong, and therefore it doesn't go anywhere. So what am I getting at? I'm basically getting at that, like, there are some flaws that no one is going to be willing to take on.
I don't know what that means.
In other words, I'm trying to be as vague as possible, but let me just be a little bit more specific. Let's say an individual looks at others in a very critical manner. That's always going to come through.
Yeah, so, right.
It's going to come through. And what woman wants to marry someone who's always critical of others?
Yeah,
it's going to be obvious to her that this guy is going to be critical of me all day long, every day, and I'm going to be dying every day.
That's why some people don't get married. That's true.
Right. So if you tell a person, listen, like you don't show any compassion and you don't hear what other people have to say. You're more interested in your own goals and what you want, etc. And that this is what causes your behavior of criticism, etc., etc. And they're not willing to listen to you about it when you're coming from a place of like, look, I'm just acting like a sister and I'm pointing something that you're not willing to see in yourself. And if you keep going like this, you're not going to get anywhere. Like, I'm not doing it for my self-aggrandizement. I'm not like, I don't bother with certain people because I'm like, who cares? I don't care. Right? Like if it's not worth my time, I'm not going to bother. So if I'm bothering, then you should know it's coming from a place of caring.
Listen. Imagine for a minute you get a job in the Navy, right?
I would never do that, but continue.
Okay, you get a job for NASA.
Another one which I would never do.
Okay.
What are you trying to get at, Rabbi? Just come to me straight.
and you're on the International Space Station, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's 5 of you, and one of you is in charge of the food, and one of you is like with trajectory, and one of you is everyone's got a vital job that if one of you is not there, right, you're gonna die, right? Your need to get this guy to be responsible is vital. The guy doesn't want
No, because once he goes down this path where he's trying to destroy me, I have no more obligation.
Yes, but if he doesn't change his ways, he's running the water system on the International Space Station. You're going to die first.
What are you going to do? What do you do? Like, I extended myself beyond what is rational even. Like to stay up and talk to someone until like midnight or longer is ridiculous in order to try to get through to them.
But you see, we've now had this guy who was in he had a nursing home. So he used to go to him to fundraise. So the guy said to him one time, I just macabre, I don't remember the age, like 73-year-old lady.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard when people get to that stage in life. They don't change very easily, right? It's the hardest demographic. So Svefno says, how did you do it? He says, well, the inspectors came by and they asked all the residents, does anyone have a problem here? And this little old lady, she raised her hand. She said, what's the problem? She says, he doesn't give me the same food as everybody else. He says, really? So he asked the guy who owns the nursing home, is that true? He says, yes, it's true. He says, well, I'm going to come back in a month. Either you give her the same food as everybody else, or I'm closing you down. Right? He had a month, right? So he goes to her, he says, lady, I give you kosher food. I give them treif. I'm not allowed in Jewish and Torah. You're not allowed to give somebody treif food, a Jew treif food, right? I give you kosher food. They eat treif, right? She says, I'm 73 years. I might be older. I don't remember, right? I've lived my whole life eating treif. I'm not changing now. She says, lady, the food I give them is garbage. This is really good food. It's better for you. She says, I'm 73 years old. I don't want to live any longer. I've had a good life. I'm done. I don't care. He says, lady, this is tasty. Right? This is tasty. Like the other stuff is just garbage. Right? This is tasty. She says, I'm 73 years old. I don't taste anything anymore. But it doesn't make me anything. I just want to sit with my friends and eat the same food they eat. Right? So he says, I had a month to make a film. So Avnal says, how did you do it? He says, I just told you. I had to make a film or they closed me down.
But he doesn't remember how.
He doesn't know. He just said things and then finally kept pushing and pushing and pushing. You see, when we give tahach and we give rebuke, you give rebuke like it's your son or your daughter.
That's exactly the way I did it.
So when it's your son or your daughter, you sit there and you figure out, how is he going to hear it? How is she going to hear it? Again, with your son and your daughter, you walk them down the aisle, you don't get everything you wanted. They don't listen to everything you tell them to do. You
Mm-hmm.
give some work over, but you do the best you can. You're trying and trying and trying, and hopefully get through. But nevertheless, Jews are a Jew is a vital component to the functioning of the world. If this Jew is not doing what they should be doing in life, you're going to suffer. It's like the
I
basic
already
thing.
did.
Okay,
I already
I'm
did.
not saying you didn't
Right.
try, but I'm just saying this is how we should look at it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
most people don't look at it from that
they
perspective.
don't
But
look
you
at it.
know what? You know what? No one else could see it. No one else could see his like deep issues. I
Right.
don't know why they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. I suspected something, but then it became clear. Like God made it clear to me, and it was like, wow. And then once it became super clear, and I confronted, that was it. I was
Yeah.
on the list of you must destroy.
Right. Because he doesn't want to. He wants to live a pretend life.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 It's tough.
This is the area that I get the most flack from. This is the area that, like, because for whatever reason, God gave me this ability to just pull down masks, and people get so upset when you do that that they strike in the most horrible ways. I am so done with it.
It's tough. 100%. It's a tough business, but that's your job. Would you think everyone loved the Navi?
Nobody loved the Navi. I feel like people like me must have been Nevi'im at the time,
Yeah.
because this is the same skill sets.
Yeah.
Nobody liked the Navi because they were telling them truths they didn't want to hear.
Right. Right.
Poor
There's a-
Yirmiyahu. I still feel for him.
yeah. Right. The Navi didn't come and say, your roses are looking good this year. It was like, if the Navi showed up at your door, it's like he's got like something you don't want to hear. Anyway,
It's strange because, like, my kids say things to me all the time, and why is it that I'm able to hear it?
there are things your kids can say. Just the same thing as my father-in-law. There are things your kids can say that no one else can say.
Maybe.
There's no defense mechanism. Your children get through; they go straight into the jugular. There's no defense system with a child parent, and same thing with a spouse. By the way, your spouse gets in too, but it gets in an aggravating way. But that's another story. Let's get back to the parsha. So we're on. So from 20, you're responsible for other people. So why do we count at 20?
Because of what you just said, because we're responsible.
Because if you're not responsible for other people, you don't count.
That sounds so awful.
True. It's true. That does sound so awful, but it's true. Right? There are an awful lot of people. We just saw an election. Right? And there's an awful lot of people that do not want to think through the issues. They just want to vote wherever they've always voted every single time. They just don't want to think it through. You bring them all the evidence you want. They don't want to think through because they're not responsible. If you're not responsible, you are part of the flock.
Wait. Are you saying that because people have this attitude of I am not responsible, they're more likely to be susceptible to being sheep and following the herd?
Not susceptible. They will be.
They will become sheep and they will follow the flock because they refuse to be responsible. This explains a lot.
It's not that they think they're being irresponsible. They think they're being responsible. No one thinks they're being irresponsible.
That's because everybody's lying to themselves. Let's be honest.
Yes, 100%. But responsibility is painful. They don't want to.
So we create a veneer of I am responsible, lying to myself, I am responsible. Right. How dare you point out that I'm not being responsible? You're X, Y, Z, up the horrible words.
Right.
And that's it. I made sure that my veneer of responsible is intact. The mask is still on.
Right.
Proceed on.
Right. And we live in a world, if you live in the Western world, where people will sell you things to make you feel like you're being responsible.
That's
Whereas,
interesting. Like what?
well, I'm saying if you live in a jungle, right, you have to be responsible. You have to think for the issues because you're going to get eaten by lions.
Exactly.
You can't pretend. You live in the Western world, right? You can pay to have a news service deliver the paper and listen to CNN or the latest, and they'll tell you what to think and who's right and who's wrong. And NPR is tremendously, crooked in this way, and it makes you feel like, oh yes, and the way they report is spend a lot of money. Their budget's enormous. The way they report is to make you feel like you got the insight. I'm giving you the inside scoop, and you understand it, and you're one of the few, the brave, and the noble,
the
special.
special.
Right, and you can join the club, and you can put a flag in your front lawn, and if you put a flag in your front lawn with a sign that these are the things we believe, that love is love, and black is black, and white is white, and all the silly quotes, I see these things now on telephone poles, empathy. It's just one word things. Have you seen them? Right, empathy. Kind.
Yeah, like just
now that's a poster I would rip down.
Right, but the people who make these signs and then put the signs up, right, they think they're doing something.
They're doing nothing. They're just cheapening a word that has meaning.
I understand that because it's the same thing as putting a lawn sign in. Oh, I'm doing something. Okay? I'm standing up for justice and truth and peace and righteousness, right?
Yeah, but don't you feel like with Doge and all this money not being given to the liberal colleges and et cetera, that perhaps the funding is starting to dry up and they're not going to be as effective in their lives?
I hope so.
Already, I saw something, I can't remember where, that like people who would have considered Columbia for their high school grads are not considering it as much anymore.
Yeah.
Their prestige is going down the tube. I wonder when they're going to wake up, when it's completely down the tube or just before it goes completely down the tube.
Yeah. As Yogi Berra once said, prediction is very difficult, especially when it concerns the future. So I'm not a Navi, so I can't tell you how it's going to end. But anyway, let's get back. So 20, if you don't, now this will answer a question that I asked Rav Noach. This week's parsha has the famous story of the golden calf. And God says to Moshe, leave me alone. I'm going to wipe out the Jewish people. We'll start again from you. And Moshe says this famous argument. You want to look it up? It's chapter 32, verse 12. And Moshe says this famous argument. He says, if you kill the Jewish people, the Egyptians will say that it's because you couldn't take them into the land of Israel. Right? The Midrash explains that there were 31 nations in the land of Israel, and the Egyptians were one nation. So against one nation, God can prevail. But against 31 nations, that's too much even for God. And therefore, he killed them in the desert.
Good argument.
It's a terrible argument. Are you kidding
Why
me?
is it terrible?
Yeah. The only reason they're saving the Jewish people is because what people will say.
He doesn't have any other argument.
He does.
What's the other argument that he has?
That's what I said to Rav Noach. Why doesn't he use Abraham's argument?
What was Abraham's argument? You know one for Sodom?
For Sodom.
Oh, if there's right, because it doesn't apply to the Jewish people, such low standards.
What do you mean? 10 tzaddikim, that's all you need. 10 tzaddikim. Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, Avihu.
Wait, Aaron was involved. You can't include him.
But not because you're telling me there's only that there's Joshua, Caleb. These are only the names we know about. These are the whole Jewish people, 3 million people that want Siddiqim. Come on.
But if he was able to use the argument, he would have. He was a master negotiator.
I just said better than Trump.
Hopefully Trump doesn't see this one.
That's right. I could get a deal. I would have got a deal. I would have got China too.
Wait, so why doesn't he use this argument that Abraham used?
Oh, that's my question to Noah.
But it must be that it wasn't a valid enough argument. Otherwise, he would have used it.
You're right. Then why wasn't it?
Or why wasn't it a valid argument? Maybe because they were so consumed with the madness. Because you know what happens? I don't know if you've ever been in a crowd of crazy people. But when you're in a crowd of people who just become emotionally overstimulated, they just sweep everybody with them. So when you're in that moment, you're no longer a tzaddik.
Okay. Half the Jewish population weren't into it, right?
Oh, the woman. But why? Wait, well, how come the women are not counted?
That's true, right? But God was wiped the whole everyone else. It wasn't everybody.
So why wasn't the argument valid? There has to be a reason, otherwise he would have used it.
That's right.
Because really they were tzaddikim, but the fact that they fell in this way is really ridiculous.
What do you mean?
In other words, like, they were just there at Mount Sinai saying that we will do and we will hear, basically saying we're going to take responsibility for each other. They were at the highest high and now they're at the lowest low. So, I mean, maybe you could use that argument if they were still at Mount Sinai and they were at such a high, but now all of them are at a low.
Right. But nevertheless, why didn't he use the argument for the Abraham used?
So then define tzaddik, because there must be something to do with that.
You're getting warm.
So please, what's the definition of tzaddik?
A tzaddik, I mean, that's a very difficult question. Right?
Because when we were learning Mesilat Yesharim, tzaddik was someone who would notice something's wrong and then would try and fix it. Chassid was someone that would notice that something is going to be really wrong and would try and fix it before it became a problem.
Right, that's right. A tzaddik takes care of a problem. A chassid makes sure there isn't a problem.
Okay, so.
But a tzaddik is someone who takes care of a problem.
They weren't taking care of the problem. They were standing by, you're saying.
That's exactly the answer. Very good. You see,
so there were people that knew that what was happening was wrong, and they didn't do anything. However, Hur did do something, and they killed him.
right.
So that's the reason why they didn't do something.
No, most of the people, it wasn't just Hur. Most of the Jewish people knew this was wrong.
I know, but he's the one that stepped forward, and when he did, they killed him. So nobody wanted the same fate of his.
Right, but if the majority of the Jewish people, if 1,000 people, 10,000 people would have stood up, they would have put it down.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to be very clever in the way you have to. I don't know. Do they have enough time to organize and make sure that they came as a front? I don't know.
They did. They said Aaron pushed them up to the next day. They didn't do anything. That's the beginning of the parsha.
Wait. What do you mean? Because Aaron pushed them off to the next day? Are you saying that their desire to stop it from happening was kind of cooled?
No, I'm saying that they had enough time to do something to stop it. They could have done, which is exactly what they did do. Moshe comes down and said, "Who's going to fight this?" And the Levium stood up.
I see. That's the thing. Nobody stood up to be a leader in Moshe's place. So they weren't able to amass the people so that they could avoid Chor's fate.
It wasn't a question of a leader. Leaders don't just stand up. It was a question of doing something about it. When you stand up and when you do something about it, people will follow you. Then you become a leader.
That's not always the case. Oftentimes people are like, oh, thank God that person got up and, let's see what's going to happen to them. How quickly are they going to be brought down? How bloody will it be? That's usually what it's like. I've been in situations where it's exactly like that.
That's true. But nevertheless, when Chor stood up, no one came to follow. No one came to
exactly my point. That's exactly my point.
That's why they were guilty.
I don't understand why since he got up anyway, why didn't he first amass his troops, so to speak, and then go into the fray? Why go into the fray alone? It never works.
Well,
it never works.
I'm not sure that that's always necessary. I don't know the strategy or any strategy that he engaged in, but the fact is that that's the beginning of the parsha. Is a Jew is different from a non-Jew. A non-Jew who does one of the 7 mitzvahs that he's not supposed to do is liable. But if his neighbor does it,
he's not liable.
He's not liable. A Jew is responsible. If your neighbor is not doing what he should, you've got to do something. And if you don't do it, you're responsible. Here, the Jewish people are engaging. A percentage of the Jewish people, significant number of the Jews, are worshiping a golden calf, and they don't do anything about it. So if you don't do anything about it, you're not a tzaddik. Moshe couldn't use that argument because there weren't 10 tzaddikim.
I see. According to the Jewish perspective, there weren't 10 tzaddikim.
That's the only way there is. That's the only perspective there is. It's mind-boggling.
Maybe part of the reason why they didn't do anything is because, when you've already engaged in that activity a long time ago, or even not so long ago, let's say months ago, then you don't feel like you have a leg to stand on. So who are you to do something about it? Do you understand what I mean? Like because all of them practically, right, except maybe the Leviim, they were idol worshippers.
That's true. That's true.
Now they're supposed to come out and be like, well, we're not supposed to do that. You see how lukewarm and tepid that is? Whereas if they had distanced themselves from it and forgiven themselves for that sin, then they would have been much stronger in their position, and then they would have really been able to do something.
That may be true, but nevertheless, in getting back to your issue with giving people tochacha, standing by is not a good idea.
Now that we've gone through this conversation, I'm wondering if that's the reason why so many people stand by, is because they have this perspective of, who am I to give the tochacha? I'm so flawed and I have so many issues myself, and who's going to listen to me? I'm so flawed. I'm so bad. I'm so wrong, blah, blah.
No, the reason they don't do anything is because they're not being responsible. People don't want to be responsible. Let me tell you, I just want to go home, turn on the TV, get a TV dinner, right? Nice bottle of wine, and forget about the world. I don't want to sit here, nothing personal, and prepare these classes and try and figure out how to get people to listen and write books. It's like a pain in the neck. Now,
I can't imagine that about you, Rabbi. You enjoy this. This is so much fun for you.
Because the truth is, when you take responsibility, it is fun. But there's a part of a part of me. I'm not going to say everybody. There's a part of me that says, "Why do I need this headache?" And that's what post people say. I don't need this headache. I just want to be go home, right? Feed the dog. Do the dishes, put on the TV, and forget about the world. I don't care.
But you can't blame people if that's their. I said you can't really blame people if that's their perspective, because the truth is you feel the same way. You know what? I sometimes wonder at my insanity in getting involved and giving tochacha and trying to change things and taking responsibility. Why the heck am I doing this? Am I crazy? what? I need this mishugas. I need to be in the path of, raving maniacs.
It's true, but the benefits you get from being responsible are enormous.
What are the benefits? Because so far I haven't seen them.
You don't raise children the same way. You don't think about life the same way. You don't
That's
enjoy
true.
life the same way.
Yeah, our kids are fantastic.
They are fantastic. I know your kids, so you don't get that by being irresponsible. I
So it's
know the
worth
people,
every insanity that I've had to deal with.
right. I
I
know
see
the
what you're
people who are
saying.
responsible, and their kids are a mess. You don't get it.
So all the what is the Shakespeare line? All the bows and arrows. How does
To
it
be or
go?
not to be. To
Whether
suffer,
to
to suffer the slings and bows and arrows.
yeah, that's what it is. It's all about suffering the slings and bows and arrows.
How's it go? Let me look it up. Shakespeare quote. How is it? It's a great quote. To be.
That's really the best thing that he's ever written.
I don't know. He's got some really good stuff.
For me, that's the best thing he ever wrote.
To be or not to be? This is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end.
Right. The sleep of comfort. The
sleep
death of comfort.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Very good. So anyway, let's get back to our golden calf, because I promised you how we should look at it. That's how we
Okay.
started. Okay. So remember, we've said this many, many times. There are three things in life you can't mess up.
Your children, your life.
Your marriage.
Hmm.
Right? So where do you learn it from? From the golden calf.
How so? I feel like you've taught this to us before, but I can't remember the details.
So you see, right, when Moshe when the Jewish people come to Mount Sinai, back in Parshas Yisro, right? So God calls Moshe to the mountain. He goes up on the top of the mountain. What's the first thing he says?
There's distress. Wait, let's
What's
see.
that?
Oh, wait. When he goes to Mount Sinai, you're saying? I'm
Say
sorry.
again?
Could you repeat the question?
The first thing God says when God comes down the mountain, this is an apocalyptic event, never before repeated, never done again, right?
I remember now. He says, "Go down to the people again and tell them not to pass the barriers up the mountain,
Right.
because he doesn't want there to be a death and to ruin the whole event."
Very good. And what does Moshe say?
Moshe goes down and does it.
No.
He doesn't? What does he do?
You can look it up. Let me find it for you.
Where was that? In Bechalach? In Israel?
No,
Where was that?
it's Parshas Yisro. Verse 23. Chapter 19, verse 23 in the book of Exodus.
1923. Okay. The people cannot ascend Mount Sinai, for you have warned us, saying, bound the mountain and sanctify it.
Right. Because he already told Moshe before.
Right. So Moshe put all the necessary barriers to ensure that it doesn't happen.
And what does God say? And what does God say?
He says, go descend, then you shall ascend, and Aaron with you, but the Kohanim and the people, they shall not break through to ascend to Hashem, lest he burst forth against them. So he's saying, even though you put up barriers, they might still come through. So go down and make absolutely certain.
Right. Now, this is, there's a famous midrash that says, why did God choose Mount Sinai? Because it was one of the lowest mountains. Right, you follow? It's still a mountain. Right. How old is Moshe?
At this point, he's at least 80.
He's 80 years old. So he climbs to the top of Mount Sinai. God comes down
Uh-huh.
and he tells him, go down and tell the people. Excuse
Uh-huh.
me? I just, it says like, you tell your husband, like, to go get me a glass of orange juice from the fridge.
Uh-huh.
Right? Goes to the fridge, comes with the, oh, you know what? Can you get me a banana too? Like, why didn't you tell me when I was in the kitchen?
Because I
Right?
just thought of it right now.
Okay, fine. You understand? That's the kitchen, right? You follow? How far
Yeah.
was that, right?
Not just a few feet, mind you.
Right. To hear Moshe climb to the top of Mount Sinai,
Yeah.
right? Close to the top of Mount Sinai. And God says to him, oh, you know what? I forgot something. Go back down, please. Right?
He
And
didn't
tell
say I
them,
forgot something. He's saying, listen, they might burst forth from the boundaries that you
yeah, I
created.
understand
You have
that.
to make absolutely certain. Go
Right.
the second time and do as I tell you.
Right. So why did he tell him when he's at the bottom of the mountain?
At the bottom, you're saying? Why didn't he
Yeah.
tell him when he was at the bottom?
Right. The first time he told him he was at the bottom of the mountain.
Because if he didn't go back up and then back down again, that energy that he invested to do that would not have been put into ensuring that the people did not burst
Okay,
forth.
that's very nice for you to say, but you're not 80 years old. You didn't have to climb a mountain.
Well, my understanding is even at 80, he was very, very strong.
Could be, but nevertheless, it's still a mountain.
Okay, Rabbi, what's the answer?
I mean, Moshe says to him, right? You know, this is unnecessary. I already told the people.
Right? So Hashem wants to ensure, and he knows that it's only going to be perfect the way he wants it if Moshe goes back down and does
Right.
it.
So what's Moshe's argument?
Well, based on what you're saying, he really doesn't have much of an argument.
He
'cause
doesn't
God
have an
is it.
argument. What's his argument? I don't know what his argument is. If God's telling you to go down, it must be because God knows something you don't.
God knows that people are going to go do it anyway, so
Right,
that's
so
why you have to go back down.
Yeah. So Moshe must know that. So why is why is Moshe arguing?
I have no idea.
Exactly. So you understand? So Moshe God knows something. What does he know? He knows that if you don't go down and tell them, they're going to break through.
Right.
You follow?
Yes.
So why didn't he do that with the golden calf?
Because he wanted them to fall.
Because the golden calf would not have messed them up. This would have messed them up. And
Right.
I'm not going to let you do something that will mess you up. You see, when I give my kids breakfast, I know when you give your kids breakfast, right? It's cereal or eggs. Make your pick. But when I give my kids breakfast, it's cereal, eggs, and rat poison.
Really?
Right?
Somehow I can't imagine you doing that.
Right, I didn't do that. I would have, but my wife won't let me.
I can't imagine why she wouldn't.
So what do you think? You're more smarter than God? You think the Almighty lets you have a choice that is rat poison? You don't have rat poison. The Almighty only lets you make choices, right? Because these are the choices you need to get to learn about, to grow from, to whatever it happens to be, right? This won't mess you up.
Huh.
You follow?
Yes.
So would it have been better if we hadn't worshipped the golden calf? It would have been better if there were people that didn't need to worship the golden calf to learn from. It's much better to learn how to ride a bicycle without having to fall off. But it's very difficult to do it that way. You have to be very attentive and really listen and be perceptive and in control of yourself. Most people can't do that. I don't know anyone who could do that. So the way to learn is to fall off. You see, the rabbis say that when the Jewish people were standing at Mount Sinai and accepted the Torah, they were like Adam in the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't die. They never forgot anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You follow?
Mm-hmm.
And they had two mitzvahs. The Midrash says that they only heard the first two mitzvahs. No, there's a God, and don't believe in any other, a positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, He's in the Garden of Eden. How many mitzvahs does he have?
Only 2. Eat of other trees, but not this one.
Right. So instead, anybody reading the Torah goes, just like Adam is going to do what God said not to do, the Jewish people are going to do exactly the same thing.
So you're saying they broke the second one.
They broke the one not to do.
Right. That's interesting because that's exactly the first. Like the first one was, do eat of all the other trees, and the first of theirs was, I am Hashem, and the second one that they both messed up on. That's very interesting.
So you see, why did they mess up? Because there's a principle of existence that's running through all these kind of stories. There is nothing that is so innately good in of itself that if you don't earn it, you will destroy it.
Wait, I didn't understand that. That's like a very deep concept that you just said, and I have no idea what you said though.
There is nothing so intrinsically good. It doesn't matter how good something is, that if you don't earn it, you will inevitably destroy it.
Right. There's the things you don't earn, you will destroy.
What's the 2 examples of that?
I guess it's the tree of knowledge and evil, good and evil, and
Mount Sinai.
And Mount Sinai.
Right. So what? Therefore, God knew this better than I knew this. So what's he doing?
What do you mean? What is he doing?
Knowing that this is what's going to happen, right? Why does he let it happen?
Because if they don't go through this, and they will not appreciate how bad Avodah Zarah is.
That's true. But you see, what they did is not what they did in the Garden of Eden. At Mount Sinai, after the golden calf, they were sorry.
Oh, you mean they felt bad?
They did tshuva.
And he didn't until much later.
He was not ever able to do the tshuva.
He wasn't ever able? I thought when he bumped into his son Cain and he found out that his son did tshuva, that's when he finally got it and he did it. I thought he did do tshuva at that point.
He learned about tshuva, but it's not clear that he actually was able to do tshuva. But the Jewish people did.
So they understood that they're not so far beyond forgiveness and beyond redemption.
They learned a tremendous amount from the experience. And that's why Moshe and the Jewish people achieve a closeness to God greater than they had before the golden calf. Moshe goes to God and says, can I see your face? He doesn't get to see his face, but he gets to see it as the closest you can possibly see. The closest he could possibly see, I should say. Right? And the Jewish people also achieve a tremendous, they get the 13 attributes. They achieve a level because it's the same thing in marriage. There's a level of closeness you can only get through messing up. You can't achieve a closeness in any meaningful relationship. There's nothing you can grow in anything without getting it wrong.
Yeah, many people do not learn. Like they mess up in marriage, but they don't learn from it, which means that what ends up happening is instead of it bringing them closer, it sets them further apart.
That's true. They don't want to learn.
Right.
Right? Because they want to pretend.
They don't want to take responsibility.
Right. But it's a slightly different concept here. They don't want to learn because they want to pretend they're God.
What?
Which word are you having a problem with?
Are you saying that's the basic behavior in marriage? That the reason people don't learn is because they want to be God in their marriage?
They want to be God, right? I know everything. I'm perfect. They won't say that. They won't say those words. Right.
That's the attitude people have? Really? Well, that's interesting.
Right.
I guess that does explain some stuff.
See, everything, and that's what Chava said. That's what the snake said to Chava. If you eat from the ace of dust, you will be like God. See, we live in a world where everything is like God.
It's true of like parents' relationship to children these days. Like they have this feeling of like, I know everything, You have nothing to teach me. You better listen to everything I say.
That's true. That's a big problem. That's why people raise dysfunctional children.
Are you saying that that's the core issue in any important relationship, is that one person is unwilling to humble themselves and they want to be God? What a waste of time.
That's true. But that's the essence of our problem in life, right? Adam and Chava could not appreciate that they weren't going to be God. It's that acceptance of that reality is how they connect with God.
It's so strange to me because, like, even the angels saw them as if they were like God. So what more do you want? Like, what more do you think you can get? It's so weird. It's counterintuitive almost.
That's true, but you see the aspect of everything. I've said this before, but everything on this planet does at least one thing really, really well.
Yes, except humans.
Right. We're born incompetent, and it's downhill from then on. There is nothing a human being does well. Okay?
It's strange that you're saying this because it's only with Yitzchak's birth are children born in this infantile, can't do anything phase. I mean, before that, they were born as if completely made, right? Like,
No, that's with Cain and Abel. Only Cain and Abel.
oh, really? They were just like,
Adam and Chava. I don't know. It seems like Cain and Abel also were born, but after that, no. People are born like regular, like we have.
okay.
Yeah. But everything has a godlike aspect to it. And when the eagle saw, it is what it is. It knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. It's in this week's Parsha that God filled B'tzalel with 3 types of wisdom: Chachma, Bina, and Das.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Chachma, Rashi brings, Chachma is learning from experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or from other people. Sorry, he says from learning from other people. Bina is what you understand from things you've learned and you build upon them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's to build. But Das is Ruach HaKodesh. Right? So Rabbi Belsky points out that the Rambam says the Ruach HaKodesh is certainty. Is when you know something so well that you're absolutely certain of it.
Interesting.
Right? And that's the knowledge you get from experience. Now, tie this into Purim. You tie that into Purim, right? You tie that into Purim, and Purim is Purim is the knowledge is you drink until you don't know, because the knowledge you get when you know something from experience, right? When you know something from experience, it creates a resentment.
When you get something from experience, you feel resentment because it's painful.
Because it's painful. But that's the price you pay, the process by getting to the point where you are certain. Right? You achieve that level of certainty. That's what Hava wanted.
She wanted certainty.
She wanted certainty. See, without experience, you can't have certainty. You don't know who you are. You don't know what life is. In other words, you don't know how to do anything.
So how would that have been different if they had eaten from the tree of life first and then from the experience?
So that you can have that certainty from Ruach HaKodesh.
You mean like learning Torah and being Devekis by Hashem?
Yes, right. You can go that way.
Oh, and then whatever experiences you get, it just basically solidifies that knowledge that you have from Torah and
Right.
and relationship with God.
Right. You can dilute it by realizing that the experience you have is good for you. And you don't have the resentment.
Yeah, but in order for you to understand that the experience that you have is good for you, you have to believe in God and you have to trust in Him.
That's right.
And in order to do that, you need to learn about that and understand it well enough to apply it.
Exactly.
So it's really,
It's a circle. Right.
yeah.
It's all the circle of life.
See.
All right, very good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
This was
guys.
extremely
Thank you.
interesting.
Happy Purim.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you, man.
Good night.
Bye.